Hi, I'm Susan Lewis from WRTI, here with Lara Downes to talk about her new album, Some of These Days. Lara, it's so great to see you.
It's so great to see you too. Isn't it so great to see people? It's so exciting.
It is so exciting. It's wonderful that we have the technology that can connect us during this very strange time.
So amazing, such a gift, yes.
How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. There are going to be barking dogs and things, so sorry. This is my home. This is my studio. I'm doing okay. I'm so busy. I'm doing a million things, and that's good. It keeps my mind off of the things I don't want to think about.
Right. Well, and you're doing wonderful things. And this music, this album is so beautiful, and
Yeah.
it it really reminds us that people have gone through difficult times in history, and that
Mhm.
music is one of the things that has enabled them to keep hope alive.
Yeah, in very profound ways.
So you have these 14 songs, spirituals, songs of struggle and protest, courage and optimism. The title references the last track on the album, a piece by Florence Price, which is based on the spiritual.
Yeah, some of these days, and it's based on a spiritual. It's also the spiritual is also known as Welcome Table, and it's a song that talks about this day in the future, some of these days, one day when we all sit together at this welcome table of bounty and equality and freedom, um, which is really at the heart of what I'm trying to express with the album, and I think it's at the heart of what we're all hoping for and needing so much. So that was that title track really says a lot about the project as a whole.
So the line is, all God's children are going to sit together one of these days. Who knew how that would resonate with us?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think that so this is a project that's a couple of years in the making, and so much on my mind has been the importance of learning from the past, from the lessons of our past, which is something that I think we forget. And even, in this sort of longer period before the pandemic, I think that we've become accustomed to crisis, and we've also become accustomed to thinking that crisis is unprecedented. And for me, it's been so helpful to think about the cycles of history, and this music speaks so clearly to that. And now in this time, more than ever, knowing that we've been through major upheavals before, we've gotten through, we will get through again.
Right. The music gives you a sense of hope and perspective on
Mhm.
the long view. But
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
and it's really wonderful. 14 pieces, spirituals, songs of struggle and protest, and also songs of courage and optimism. Um, how did this album grow from the your idea to?
Yeah, that's always, sort of a multi-layered process, and I always have clarity about it, not until it's done, really. But I think that in a lot of ways, this project is sort of part two of the album that I made in 2016 called America Again, which was my first really definite attempt to start exploring and redefining the narrative about, what American music is, who it belongs to, who wrote it, who it's for, where it comes from, all these different traditions that pull together to make it, the diversity of it, the really broad span of it. And so some of this music had been percolating, I guess, since then. And I realized at a certain point that something really personal that mattered a lot to me was this moment, this particular marriage of traditions, where the African American tradition comes together with the European concert tradition, and causes so much shift, which echoes, of course, a much greater, wider cultural shift in our history. And so that was my entry point to the world of spirituals, and realizing how much they have informed every single branch of American music, because really, I mean, spirituals are our first truly American music. And so this project is, again, broad. It's an attempt to at least pay some tribute to all of the places where spirituals come in and, you know, create new traditions. It's a lot. And of course, I can't begin to touch on the true breadth of it, but I've tried to represent, you know, a sampling of what this music means and where it's been.
So every piece has a story and has its own backstory, and also has a connection to you and your story.
Yes, longest liner notes ever. Right? I sat down over the holiday break and started writing these notes, and I think I ended up writing some sort of an encyclopedia. But yeah, it's there's a lot of personal connection and personal history, family background in this as well.
Well, and it's so interesting because there's such variety in styles and instrumentation, and a number of collaborations with solo voice, vocal ensembles, violin, string quartet, trumpet.
Yeah.
It has a very powerful beginning. The very first track, Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child. How did that come together?
That was, that was a pivotal moment in the project. So I was, you know, down some internet rabbit hole. I was in the Library of Congress Folklife archives. I was in the Library of Congress Folklife archives, you know, looking for source material, and I found this recording from 1939. It was taped in Rayford, Florida, down in rural Florida, in a women's penitentiary, one of the Lomax field recording trips through the southern states. And I just heard this little snippet of these women singing this song, you know, and just it pulled me back into that moment in history. You know, it's the rural South, it's the Jim Crow era, it's these women who are incarcerated, who knows why, you know, and started thinking about the sorrow that they are expressing. And at that same moment, you know, in December of last year, there were families being separated at the border. You know, so you talk about the cycles of history and how we repeat our mistakes and, you know, have to find our way out over and over again. And so I think those ghost voices, you know, that's really at the root of the ancestral part of this project. You know, I really wanted it to connect the past and the present and the future. There's a lot about the future, but really acknowledging and paying tribute to the voices that have come before.
Right, and I see how you I see how it relates to the past, the present, and the future, because you also talk about you tie some of the songs to efforts today.
Mm-hmm.
Human Rights Watch, the Equal Justice Initiative, AmericanRivers.org, to indicate that people are still working to make things better for all of us.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's because it's not a linear thing. You know, throughout this, it was nice. I was able to really connect with my mom, because my mom and my dad met during the civil rights movement. And I remember when I was younger, I always wanted these dramatic stories from her about, you know, how it was all triumphant and, you know, exciting. And at a certain point when I was a kid, she said, you know, it wasn't always what you see on, you know, on the clips on TV. We spent a lot of time just sitting in, you know, classrooms, having meetings and making flyers. And, you know, it was a little bit at a time. It was tiny steps at a time. And that really stuck with me. And as I see where we are today, you know, I know that we feel that we've lost so much ground in terms of progress, but that's how it goes. You move forward and then you cycle back and forward again. And so really this process of touching base with all of the efforts that are underway now, just to continue the work, you know, just to keep this work inching along, because this vision that we have, this promise that we have as a country, it's a very, very long road. And, you know, we just keep moving on it. That's what we do. So yeah, I think it was really enlightening, I think, to me, to realize that we're just, you know, we're still on this same long march of progress.
Right, and there are wonderful arrangements of familiar tunes, also music previously unpublished and recorded. For Margaret Bond's piece, The Bells.
Yes. Yeah, so Margaret Bonds has become one of my favorite composers, colleague and close friend of Florence Price. And, you know, this is music that comes from such a fascinating time and place in the 1930s, when the Harlem Renaissance and the Chicago Renaissance and the Great Migration were just causing all of this flourishing in the arts. And they wrote extraordinary music. And I've been playing Margaret Bond's Troubled Water for some years, but it turns out that the that suite had some other movements that were as yet unpublished and unrecorded. So that was a treat to be able to bring that music to life on recording for the first time.
It's really beautiful. And this album also, I gather, taps into your interest in young people.
Mm-hmm.
For the pieces, like the Hold On,
Mm-hmm.
is kind of what you might tell to young people, perhaps in your Promise project.
Yes, yes. Or in my household with my kids, that's what I'm telling them every day. We will get through this. Hold on. Yes. Yeah. You know that I've been really active with young people um, for such a long while now, and this is what we talk about over and over again. I have this project that you referred to called My Promise Project, which is inspired by a poem of Rita Dove's. The line is, "I gave my promise to the world, and the world followed me here." And I think that that's such an important thing for all of us. I mean, all of us, but particularly young people, to hold on to, connect with the promise that we hold inside and what we can give to the world and how we can do it in small and big ways. And so as I travel around, or have traveled around, who knows when that's going to happen again. But as I'm working with young people, this is the question that we tackle. What is my promise to the world? Not what do I want to be when I grow up, but who am I now? And what is it inside me that wants to give itself to the world? And how can I do that in my small community, in my classroom, in my neighborhood, in my family, in my wider community as I grow? And it's really empowering. And I think that, young people always astound me with their vision. They always have big, bold vision. And I think sometimes we don't listen to them and we don't let them articulate that. So that's been something really, really important to me. That's one of the things I'm working on right now. Since I'm not able to move around freely, and since all these kids are also at home, I'm working on bringing the Promise Project online so that I can continue that work and broaden that work.
That's really wonderful. So this music is so great, and it seems so pure Lara, because it's rich with storytelling and has so much heart, and it really blends all of these different traditions, as you say. Is there any particular music that you go back to over and over again on the album?
I mean, they're all kind of favorite children. I think there's a lot of really emotional content. I mean, I think I recorded "We Shall Overcome" on this album with the Chapin sisters, and that was a lovely day. We met about a year ago as guests of Judy Collins at one of her at a gala in Judy's honor in New York, and the Chapins come from this long line of folk music royalty, really. And just having been brought together by Judy, who's such a shining example of an artist citizen and an activist, and somebody who has really applied her artistry and her voice to the greater good throughout her long career. So it was really beautiful to come together and record that song. And I'll always remember this. We were sitting together in the studio and trying to figure out how to record a 3-minute version of "We Shall Overcome," which can extend, it can go on and on. There's a lot of verses. So we were choosing which verses we wanted to record. And the one that spoke most strongly to all of us was "We Are Not Afraid Today." And that's sort of the climax of the song. And here we are in this time, when we are all just terrified. So I find myself listening to that track over and over again. And it connects me with my parents and their fight for freedom, and holding on to our courage and knowing that better things are coming. So many. I'm really proud of this album. I think the collaborations are so strong and they're so special and unique. The track that I recorded with Toshi Reagan, "Steal Away."
Right.
We talked about that.
Oh, I was just going to say, because I read in the notes that it arose from a conversation about music and how to make it matter, and it's so beautiful and rich.
And it was a miracle. That track sort of happened as a miracle. Toshi and I kept trying to get together in the studio. We were both, on the road and never able to connect. And one night she sent me this recording that she had made. She'd had a little time in the studio, and she called it a meditation on "Steal Away." And she said, maybe you can use this, whatever. And it was so beautiful and perfect and ethereal and I couldn't think of anything I could do to make it better. And I sat at the piano and I, you know, played around with it, and I was just messing it up. And then one day I took my mom to see the movie Harriet, and which also uses a lot of this music in the soundtrack. It was really interesting. But there's this scene where she comes to the end of this, you know, journey that she's made through the woods and through the rivers, and this perilous, you know, journey by night. And she arrives in Philadelphia. and and all of a sudden it's a different universe, you know, and there are people of color walking the streets dressed, you know, like people, and she's never seen this, and she could never have imagined it. And there's just something about that moment, you know. It's like when you see those old photos that have been colorized and you realize the like the living, breathing truth of a moment, and you realize these different realities that existed at the same point of time, and you know, physical distances being what they were at that time, how far apart they were. And I started thinking about the Ives Concord Sonata, which is a piece I've played for many years. It depicts exactly that moment in time, you know, the 1840 in Concord, Massachusetts, this group of transcendentalists and abolitionists who are living this idyllic life, but even they are trying for something better, right? And I'm thinking about the, you know, the reality of the South and the North at that time. So my poor mom, we get to the end of the movie and I like drag her out of the theater, and we get home and my husband says, "How was the movie?" And I'm like, "Shh, shh, shh, shh." And I go to the piano and I start playing the Concord Sonata and listening to this thing that Toshi had sent me, and it just was like meant to be. So I made this weird mashup of Ives and Steal Away, and it's really this, you know, sound portrait of the Underground Railroad and what that journey was, and, you know, parallel universes. So it was goosebumps.
Right? Oh, it's beautiful, and it's just. I mean, I was going to ask you about you. You really actively created a lot of different arrangements on this album, didn't you?
Yeah. From the first track, from that piano soliloquy that grows out of the Motherless Child field recording. Yeah, I think, you know, I didn't want to sort of step on anybody's toes. I didn't want to redo anything that, you know, someone else has already done better. You know, I mean, I have my voice, I have my background, my skill set, I guess, and I wanted to be really respectful of this music. This music needs a lot of respect around it. So, you know, bringing in collaborators who represent other traditions and finding the place where we could, you know, connect and align, that was really beautiful and expanding for me. I love these collaborations that give me new insights into, you know, the music that I'm making and what can be done with it.
And did you do a lot of improv?
No, I have a disability called a classical music training. So I like to have notes on the page.
Some of the pieces sound like just.
Yeah, no, they're very spontaneous, but the notes are there.
All right. Well, it's a really terrific album. You made a video, I understand, of a couple of the pieces.
Yeah.
Should we listen? What should we listen for in those pieces?
You know, the Bells is a really wonderful sort of fantasy. It's based on the spiritual Peter Go Ring Them Bells, but there's this moment in the middle that, to me, the melody is the same as Couldn't Hear Nobody Pray. And you know, last year we lost the great Jesse Norman, who made a tremendous recording of that song. And so when I get there to that climax of this piece, I always sort of feel her in my heart. That's been another really beautiful thing, is just feeling all of these artists who came before, kind of looking over my shoulder and, you know, furthering the lineage and the legacy. And then some of these days, that is an arrangement. It's an arrangement that I made of the Florence Price arrangement. It's such a beautiful meditation, and I just hope that we can all stay connected to this, you know, this idea of a better future. I know that for me, you know, day by day right now, it's so hard. I think the hardest thing is not knowing when we get through this, you know, and what's on the other side. But then I realize nobody ever does. Nobody ever knows. It's only the hindsight of history that we know how things end, you know? So just to keep that kind of wide-eyed vision of, you know, the fact that the better thing is coming and that there is a time when we will all sit together and have all the things we need.
Well, sometimes I think music expresses who we are and what we've been, but it can also inspire us and tap to be the best version of ourselves. And
So
that's what
much.
this music does. It fills you with hope and a feeling that a very human feeling that we will get through this. So thank you so much, Lara Downes.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to be with you.